Hi, I'm Ken Miller.
And I'm David Erdos.
And welcome to the Erdos Miller New Technology Podcast. Our podcast is sponsored by Gibson Reports, offering the best NPT and directional drilling market share reports. Check them out on GibsonReports.com. So, David, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So, I'm subbing in for Zach, who is subbing in for me. I think we're going to try and have a little bit more variety going forward. So, Zach will be back. Don't think that Zach is gone forever. And I am now a proud father of two sons. So, we got a 4-week-old at home. That's pretty exciting. I'm just looking forward to the future, damage bills that two male
See
children
what they scheme up together.
Yeah,
once they start scheming.
Yeah, are going to destroy in the house, right?
Yeah.
Like my wife and I have a little debate because our pool at home backs up right to the house, right?
Uh-huh.
And so the debate has been, at what age are the boys going to start climbing onto the roof to jump off into the pool? And so the debate's between 6 and 11 years old or something.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they'll figure it out eventually, right?
You should make a bet.
Yeah, that's what we're doing, right? So Dave, let's get into one of my favorite topics, right?
What's that?
The ongoing discussion of what is the BHA of the future, right? And I mean, we've probably been talking about this for 10 years, but I think we have a little bit better, vision for what it is now, right?
Let's start with the basics. What is a BHA?
So BHA is a common industry acronym. Initialism. Initialism.
Right,
we talked about this.
Yeah.
So it's an initialism because we don't say it. We don't go BHA, right? It's BHA. So bottom hole assembly, right?
Yeah.
And it basically refers to everything below the drill pipe, including up to and including the bit, right? So it's all the stuff that we have at the end of our drill stem, right?
Yeah.
If you want to use a patenty kind of term, right?
Yeah.
And so that might include the bit, rotary steerable or a motor, and NPT, and stabilizers and agitators and extra drill collars and Monels and heavyweight drill pipe, right?
Yeah.
It's just really all the stuff that you set up. From where the regular old drill pipe ends, towards the end, right?
Okay.
And so there might be some other components further back up in the drill pipe too, but that's usually what it refers to, right?
Typically it's just dumb drill pipe, standard drill pipe above the BHA.
Sometimes other stuff goes in there, right? So sometimes other agitators or repeaters or whatever else, right? And so, there's... this is a huge job for a drilling engineer, right? Is deciding what his BHA should look like, what components are going to go in there, what do I need for what formation, what size, all this kind of stuff, right? And there's endless debates about stabilized versus not stabilized. I don't know anything about that stuff, right? So we're focused on kind of talking about the bit, the NPT, the motor, the rotary steerable, anything that has kind of electronics in it, the really lower portion of that BHA, right? And so, I believe for a long time that the best combination is going to be starting with the bit on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And then I think rotary steerable is going to take over. I think we're going to see, I think that, the 20s is the age of the low-cost rotary steerable, right? Or the more economical rotary steerable. I think running the NPT right behind that is great, right? And then I think running a straight motor behind that is really great, right?
Okay.
And people will often disagree with me.
Yeah.
And so that's fine. But that is a configuration that I just really believe in, right? And that's being done today. I mean, there are people running BHAs of that today. I think we've been talking about this kind of concept for almost 5 years, but it's kind of becoming a reality now. It's the question is where does it go after that?
What are some of the advantages of that configuration versus more typical?
Well, obviously, there's tons of advantages of just running a rotary steerable versus a bent motor, right? And so as the rotary steerable cost comes down and their capabilities go up, I expect that to become the primary steering instrument, right? Now, one of the things you just can't ignore is a positive displacement motor just generates a ton of power, just a shocking amount of power, right? That a rotary steerable really can't replace with a turbine or batteries or whatever else, right? And so we're still going to have those motors in there because we need that just raw power that we can harness from our pumps with a straight motor, right? Or just whatever motor, right? And then, I'm a big believer in putting the NPT below it because you can pulse below a motor. It does work. And getting those measurements as close to the bit and then being able to talk to the rotary steerable, right? And so, the big advantages is using the rotary steerable, having the NPT as close to the bit as possible, right? And then really still being able to utilize that proven technology of a motor, right?
Yeah.
So now a lot of people will disagree me and say the NPT has no business being below the motor, right?
Yeah.
Because, you have so many extra cycles and the shock and vibe's worse and the magnetic spacing's harder to get.
Right.
Those are all, very fair criticisms of that design, right? There's a lot of cost that goes into an NPT, and so putting it below a motor is It's kind of scary, right?
I'm going to destroy this,
Yep.
really expensive piece of kit.
Now, yeah, now that does change a little bit if you have a rotary steerable that, doesn't need a motor. But I'm also not a rotary steerable expert, right? We're trying to be experts in the NWD side of things.
Right.
I say trying
The
because
electronics side.
yeah, I feel like that's a continual journey, right? Like we're always getting better, right? So I mean, if you kind of accept the arguments against that configuration, then a way that I can see that evolving into the future is, and in some cases it's even being done now, is you run a bit and then a rotary steerable, and then you run sort of a sensor sub below the motor, and then you run your motor, and then you have your NWD back, right?
Yeah.
And then you short hop information from that sensor sub back to the NWD, right?
Okay.
And so that sensor sub might include things like, today I think like torque on bit, weight on bit, right?
Yeah.
Or inclination, right? And a lot of times those subs, their job is to stab into the rotary steerable and then hop that information back across to the NWD,
Okay,
right?
so they also act as a short hop.
Sometimes, yeah. So that's the design of certain rotary steerable systems, and I've talked to a few customers who've experimented with running that kind of combination, right?
Okay, really?
Yeah, and so that brings me to kind of an analogy that I want to make for the NWD going forward, right?
Yeah.
And I really, begun to look at the NWD as kind of like becoming more and more like a smartphone, right? And I'm not going to say iPhone or Android because I'm not going to pick a side in that debate.
Yeah.
Even though you and I are both iPhone guys.
That's
right. So, the iPhone, when I look at it, right, it has a bunch of smarts in it, but it has, essentially two ways of communicating, right? It has a short range communication, meaning Bluetooth, right? And then a long range communication, meaning the cell communications, right?
Yeah.
And so if I extend that analogy to an NWD, right, then I would say, okay, a short hop would be like kind of an example of a short range communications, akin to Bluetooth, right?
Yeah, just within the BHA.
Right. And then whether or not you have mud pulse telemetry or electromagnetic telemetry or both, right, then that's akin to your long range communication, your cellular communication, right?
Right.
And so, when you have your smartphone and you're driving down the road, right? Your smartphone might be talking to, via Bluetooth to your earbuds, right? Your wireless earbuds, might be talking to your car, might be talking to your smartwatch. I don't know what all the other crazy things that people connect, to Bluetooth to. But the point is, it's like a nice standard wireless protocol that you can connect any number of things to and get utility from, right? And so that long range modem can, the cellular modem can exchange, information with the internet, and then get music or information or whatever else to your peripherals, right? Or vice versa, they can send something back about what you're doing. It's like a fitness tracker, right? So a fitness tracker could be, gathering on your wrist, gathering all sorts of information, and then sending it back to the
cell phone,
and then back there, right? And so that fitness tracker might be akin to like, or the analogy might be extended to like a kind of a drilling dynamics sub, right? And so kind of the way I see the BHA is evolving over the next 5 or 10 years. And the reason I keep talking about the 20s is because so we're going to be doing a talk. Yes, it's almost 2020. Shockingly, where did the time go? But we are going to be doing, I think, we're going to be doing a panel at the next IADD event in October. I'm going to break the fourth wall here. Shannon, do you know the date? 21st and 22nd. The 21st and 22nd. On what, how NWD is going to be evolving in the 20s, right?
Okay.
And so everyone should come, and we're talking about all of these topics, but this is what's got me thinking about this again today, right? And so, I see, kind of that same, mechanical structure, right? But I see that evolving into a lot of very smart BHA peripherals that are all locally talking to the NWD, and then the NWD getting all that information up and down, right?
Yeah, so that's a lot more connected than what we typically see now, right? Right now, the RSS is kind of in its own world.
Yeah, you might just have the rotary steerable like mechanically linked to the NWD, or like the NWD just mechanically linked to like a LWD sub or like a resistivity collar or nothing else, right?
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of the communication has to be wireless.
Yeah.
Right, and the communication has to be an open standard, right? Or at least, a standard that everybody else can develop to, right?
Right.
And there's two reasons between that. One, I think that just mechanical wired interlinks are just not practical. Like there's just too many sizes of tools and too many combinations and too many engineering concerns. I think it's got to be wireless to overcome all that, right? And then also if you get into the whole thing of like mechanically bolting to some other manufacturer's tool, usually the legal department gets involved. And then once that happens, things just crawl to a halt, right? But like if we're all just designing to an open wireless standard and agreeing to how that works,
right,
or just buying modules off the shelf that all work according to that standard, then that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
It's just a lot more easy to do. And so, wireless and open standard, right? Because, it'd be kind of suck if we do all this and then there's like, okay, well, you talk this protocol or that protocol, right?
Yeah.
Please tell me please hope to God we don't end up like with a Q wireless that's just like some
QMix wireless protocol.
Yeah. So hey, you know what? But I know we're not big fans of the whole QMix thing, but at least it works, and at least it's pretty standard, So
there is some standardization there, so that's good.
Maybe you can make an argument that any good standard that finally ultimately exists ends up being a compromise and it kind of annoys you anyways, and you should just appreciate it for what it is.
I wonder if the Bluetooth guys are have all this internal rivalry.
Or just complain about Bluetooth. Yeah. It's like, oh, it's nice it exists, but it's a total pain in the butt.
Yeah, it should have been done this way, or
right, totally. And so, I see a future where we have a smart bit, right? That's where, it has parameters that it's monitoring and recording. It'd be really great if we could get inclination and weight on bit right there, in the bit, and then it's able to talk back, right? Mm-hmm. A rotary steerable, right? And, a rotary steerable also should be getting us, weight on bit, torque on bit. It should be giving us inclination. Ideally, we'd have even our gamma sensor down in the rotary steerable, right? So the rotary steerable might cannibalize NWD a little bit there, right? By like moving the inclination and gamma sensor down into the rotary steerable. You could also have an extra sensor sub that might be measuring weight on bit, torque on bit, shock and vibe, inclination, gamma, right? Azimuthal gamma, that might go right above the thing. You could have a LWD collar that has its own batteries and it's just wireless, and you put it wherever it goes, and it's wireless back to the NWD. It doesn't have to be physically connected, right? Smart motors, maybe they're monitoring their RPM and their motor health and stuff like that. Smart agitators, right? Mm-hmm. You could have an agitator that has the ability to turn itself off and on command, or like maybe different levels of agitation, right?
Right.
But the NWD being the central hub of all of this, right? And so any of these parameters that we're wanting to monitor from any of these smart BHA components, communicating that stuff via short hop back to the NWD, right?
Right.
And then the NWD communicating that to surface, right? And then any of the commands that we want to send down being communicated to the NWD and then sent locally back to any of these peripherals, right? And so, because you might want to change the build rates or the hold inclination and azimuth of a rotary steerable.
Right.
Maybe you want to turn an agitator on and off, or decide how much agitation to give, right? The possibilities are just really kind of endless.
Yeah, I think you really, at that point, start looking at the MWD more of just a means of transmitting data from all these other smart systems back and forth between surface and downhole.
I've always said the NWD is kind of like a device that wants to tear itself apart, not just because we're beating the crap out of it underground, but because, really, the sensor wants to be as close to the bit as possible, right?
Yeah.
Ideally ahead of the bit, if we could figure out some way to
imaginary world.
Or in a world where, like, we can do some funky, Star Trek style scanning ahead, right?
Right.
And then the transmitter really wants to be as close to the surface as possible, right?
Yeah.
So the further from the bit and the further from other BHA components and the closer to the surface you can get, the better your signal is going to be. And that applies for both EM and mud pulse, right?
Right.
Because mud pulse will have less interference, right? Less immediate reflections, and then EM will just, it'll benefit from the fact that this really crappy dipole antenna is getting a little bit better.
A little bit more ideal.
A little bit more ideal, right?
Yeah.
And so you could even think about a future where, you have maybe a smart bit, rotary steerable. It's got inclination, gamma, azimuthal gamma on it, right? And then, maybe some sort of dynamic sub right behind that, and then a motor that's monitoring its own health. And then maybe after that, you've got a sub that is just doing your magnetic and gyro readings, right?
Yeah.
And it just has a short range transmitter, right? Mm-hmm. And then your long range transmitter, your mud pulse and your electromagnetic, maybe they're 500 or 1,000 feet back from the bit, right? As far as that short hop will go, so that you can maximize, what you're getting out of those transmitters to push further and further, right?
Right.
And so, I think the, this is all gonna be driven by the market, right?
Right.
And so the more aggressive we get, the longer laterals, the more we're gonna have to start exploring this kind of stuff to be able to do this, right? So tell me why this is a bad idea. Tell me like where this is gonna fall apart.
Well, the immediate things that come to mind are cost.
Yeah, it's gonna be expensive.
It's gonna be more expensive to have multiple smart components.
Yep.
Battery life. keeping all those things powered.
Yes, that's true.
And just standardization, like getting that some kind of standardized means of communicating and everybody kind of play nice together with their competitors.
That one sounds like the easier one.
Yeah, that's more of a business and kind of communications thing. The others are, pretty big technical challenges.
Like the smart bit would be tough, right? To have something that transmits, right? Because you'd probably need like another generation of like smaller electronics and better power sources. Because today I know there's bits that like record some memory, right? But then adding a transmitter, even a short hop transmitter, would be
take
tough.
Some power.
Right?
Yeah, a lot more than it does just to log data.
Yeah. But you're right. And maybe the idea of like 5 peripherals with one central thing is a bit too crazy, but maybe it ends up being like, maybe we end up talking to the rotary steerable wireless and then some sort of, instrumentation sub and then the NPT, right? That's where we go next before it gets too crazy, right? So
right. And if there was even some level of standardization versus none, like there is now, I think that would be a step in the right direction of allowing some of these systems to interoperate and be somewhat vendor agnostic.
Yeah. A cool thing you could do is if you did have the transmitters and the sensor subs separated, you could put 2 sensor subs for redundant sensors and then have just one transmitter and they could all talk, right? So
yeah, and you could measure, if you have one near the bin, one further back, you measure how much bend you have.
Right, and I think that, just over the next 10 years as things evolve, we're going to see a big increase in bandwidth. I think it's possible that, by the end of the decade that, maybe... I think mud pulse systems will be consistently delivering 5 to 10 bits per second.
Yeah.
And I think that EM systems will probably be delivering somewhere like 20 to 30 bits per second consistently, which might give us an overall effective bandwidth of getting close to 30 to 50 bits per second, right? Overall. So we're going to have a lot more bandwidth to get there. I mean, obviously that's 10 more years of work we're talking about, right?
It seems so unreal to think that kind of data rates, but I think it's possible in 10 years.
Right, and we're also pushing more aggressively for things like closed loop drilling, right, where we want to be able to have a machine at the surface tell the BHA what to do, right? And so we're going to have these downlinking and then short hopping command kind of capabilities, and they need to happen quick if we're going to achieve that, right? So, so the question is like, what kind of drilling is going to, necessitate the development of all this technology, right? So, certainly, wellbores that are closer together, longer laterals, all this kind of stuff would necessitate kind of this crazy idea for the future, right? So,
right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's my spiel, man. So,
That's good.
Yeah. What else? What else do you think our viewers would like to know about this?
I think they would like to know reliability, because that's also always a big concern. It's like, is this going to be more reliable than current systems? Sounds
like a bunch of jewelry to me.
Yeah.
So I think if that's the way it goes, like there has to be gains that really this BHA has got to be capable of something that traditional BHAs are just not to justify all the jewelry. And reliability when you add more doesn't usually go up, right?
No.
And so it's really the benefits have to outweigh whatever reliability you have from adding additional components, right?
Yeah.
But there are real problems to be solved here. Like we need drilling dynamics while drilling today. Like that's a big demand, right?
Right.
Like so, how are we going to hook that up to the NPT today, right? Because that's a collar-based measurement. That's difficult to do, right?
Yeah.
And then I can't tell you how many rotary steerable to NPT communication projects I've seen just peter out because we can't agree how to mechanically fit it together. Like that. Right. Those are all real needs today that I'm kind of extrapolating out into the future.
Right. And I think. But one of the big challenges will be, the simplicity of current systems will have to be overcome with similar reliability or better reliability, and then proven that this better modern BHA gives you better wellbore quality, better production in the long run.
Well, that's the real trick, right? Because if you look at computer systems, we are orders of magnitude more complicated than anything that was done in the 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, right? So we are certain the complexity curve is going up, right? So you got to maintain not just maintain, you got to improve reliability while keeping up with that increasing demand and complexity curve, right?
Yeah,
so,
which is certainly possible. It's just going to require the necessary steps to validate and improve those systems.
Totally. All right, well, I think that's all I have for today. I'm Ken Miller.
And I'm David Erdos.
And this is another episode of the Erdos Miller New Technology Podcast. Once again, check out our sponsor, Gibson Reports, gibsonreports.com. Excellent NPT and directional drilling market share reports. Thank you.